We're all so glad that you're here, and we know that there is a lot going on in everyone's busy schedules and lives, not to mention some of the weather. So, thank you for being here today for Move Your Virtual Leasing Beyond COVID-19. I'm Tara McAvoy. I'm the marketing manager at Grace Hill, and want to cover just a little bit of housekeeping for you while everyone's arriving. Uh, you'll see that on the next slide that we'll just have a bit of Q&A. Oh, it's not actually here, but we will have Q&A for everyone. We know you'll have some questions, but we have a lot of really important data and information to cover here. So we'll ask that you put your questions in the Q&A as the conversation goes along. We will address those, as many as we can, at the end of the session. And if we can't address your question, we will follow up with you afterwards. Those will be captured. Also, this is being recorded, and I know, as we can see everyone saying in the chat where they're coming from, that folks, especially in the Texas area, maybe in California or Indiana, you might be experiencing some spotty internet and some power. This is being recorded, and we will share it with everyone who registered today. So that will be sent in the follow-up. That said, let me go on to introduce our presenter for today and say thank you, Christi Dobbins, for being here to run us through all of this information on virtual leasing. Christi has been overseeing Validate since its inception in 2019. This is a product that is very young, and she has been running through all of it since the beginning, which includes the fact that when COVID hit a year ago, it meant that many of our shops actually had to be on pause, and we had to take a pretty dramatic and rapid turn toward virtual touring and virtual leasing to get all of the shops for that established. But Christi was at the helm, and immediately once we got that going, shifted also over to training and helping people learn how to do these things better, how to do self-guided tours, how to do virtual tours. And we did a string of training on that here at Grace Hill throughout COVID very rapidly. We made them available to the entire industry through recordings of several different webinars. And we also made those webinars available as courses in Vision, because it was important to us not just to communicate to Grace Hill customers, but to everybody who might be in need. So Christi is here today to give us a review and a benchmark of the data and the information gathered even in that short period of time. So thank you, Christi, so much for being here and for sharing your wealth of knowledge. And we're looking forward to everything that you have to share.
Thanks, Tara. Thanks so much. And I'm really excited to be here to talk about this. As Tara was talking about, it's been a very wild ride. 2020 was a wild ride. And, honestly, the shift to virtual leasing was probably the least of it for most people. But, it had a big impact, especially on me. And I know many of us in the industry. So before we start, though, just want to send my well wishes and best thoughts to you guys that are being impacted by the weather across the nation. And, I hope that you get everything back to normal as quickly as possible. And if you're listening to this recording and couldn't join live, that's okay. That's why we record it. So, for those of you who are here today, thank you so much. I saw some familiar names in the chat there, so I love seeing that. So getting into the agenda here, again, 2020, wild ride. We're still feeling the effects of it, of course. Most believe that our leasing environment has changed for the better. Over the course of 2020. Virtual leasing really became a staple for most management companies out there now, and self-guided tours got a much deserved boost in popularity, which is great. So over the last 12 months, hard to believe it's been 12 months, we've been conducting virtual shops and self-guided tour shops for our clients. And we have learned a lot during that time period. And today we're going to actually look at a lot of those results, discuss what they mean, and discuss opportunities to improve for the future. So with that said, Tara, I'd love for you to put up the first poll for us today. I'd like for you guys to participate here and let us know what your level of virtual leasing adoption is to date at your communities.
Right. Answers coming in. We really do want to hear from everyone. Where are you at with virtual leasing? We'll take about another 15 or so seconds to get your answers in. So far, it's looking like a pretty clear position that folks are in. All right. I'm going to end the poll now. Thanks to everybody who contributed. And here are our results, Christi.
Okay, so let's see. I love this. It's been a difficult road in 2020 to get up to speed, but I love that there's a pretty good confidence level right now in terms of using virtual leasing, feeling good about it, and plan to continue using it. I love that. And that was the answer I was hoping for. And I think that today's webinar will really help fine tune it even more and allow it to be more successful as you continue to use it. Those of you who are sitting in that 30% bucket where you've kind of used it, but you still need to tweak it some, you're not alone. You can see that. It's the second most popular. So again, hopefully this will help as well. And for those who haven't taken on virtual leasing yet, hopefully you can get from this today that it really has a great opportunity to be an option for your on-site teams, for your customers, not just for COVID, but for specifically what customers are preferring moving forward. So thank you for that. So for our agenda today, first of all, we are going to go ahead and evaluate the trends from the 2020 virtual and self-guided tour mystery shops. We are going to review how the COVID-19 environment has really not just caused the rise of virtual tours, but also impacted other leasing efforts. We have data to support that. And then we're going to talk, basically what are our main findings and how can we use that information to give us an opportunity to improve in the future as we continue to adjust our leasing practices. So the first thing I'm going to talk about here, and this information that we're looking at here, and I'm going to tell you right now, there's a lot of data in this presentation today because that's what I'm giving you. I'm going to give you really a benchmark to look at. What has the data shown us? So my apologies right off the bat for having so many charts to show you, but I hope you get a lot of information out of them. I do want to let you know that the data that we're looking at represents 1,500 shops from last year. We only used 1,500 as a sample. We wanted to ensure also that we are only using what we call program shops. These are shops that are not targeted to a specific individual. They are random, and so it really increases the validity of those results. We don't want them skewed in any way. So that's what this information is representing. So the first information we're looking at here is the beginning of the virtual tour, which is typically done where somebody calls the community on the phone. And as you probably can imagine, and this data supports very well, the beginning of that phone conversation, whether it's just a phone shop or a virtual shop, the results are very similar. They're almost exactly the same. So you can see with greeting, it's 85% is the average score. That was very consistent over all of 2020. In terms of asking for phone or email address, that was 83%. Again, consistent whether it was just a phone shop or a virtual shop, and very consistent over the course of 2020. And then the last part here, when we compare phone shops to virtual shops, is the identifying needs part. This is where they're asking, why are they moving? When are they looking to move? Number of occupants, specific preferences, things like that. Again, very similar between virtual and phone in terms of scoring, very consistent over the year, but obviously the big elephant here is This is a much lower score than the first two items. And really, generally, the reason for that, the biggest issue in terms of identifying needs, the scores really drop off when you look at if they're asking for specific preferences. Usually they'll ask when they're looking to move or how many bedrooms, but they're not asking them specifically what their preferences are and what they're looking for. So, but you can see here, they start off pretty much the same. The fact that they're virtual shops or virtual tours is not really creating much of an impact here yet in terms of results. So next, we are going to look at demonstrating value before price. So a lot like identifying specific needs, demonstrating value before giving the price continues to be a big area for opportunity. You can see we're scoring right in the 40% there for virtual. The other thing that you can see here is that there was no improvement over the year in virtual shops in demonstrating value before price. What that tells me is that there wasn't really a learning curve. The fact that it was a virtual tour, that was not what was causing the low score. The low score here is reflective of this just being a basic skill gap that our on-site teams struggle with a lot. They struggle with it on the phone. You can see the average on the phone in 2020 is 28% for this. They struggle with it on on-site. Average score is 70%. Now, why is virtual higher than phone here? The reason that it seemed to be in this one is that because people were anticipating or planning to actually demonstrate and take them on a tour of the community, they did start to talk a little bit more about the apartment features before they actually gave the price. That doesn't happen as often on the phone. So I think because they were planning to give the tour on the phone, at some point they start talking about the features more and giving more value, which is why that's higher than phone, but still much far below on-site. So we absolutely have room for improvement there. Okay, so where did we improve? This is a fun part. I really loved looking at these results. There absolutely was great improvement when it came to virtual tours in 2020. There was dramatic improvement actually in 3 big areas. Now in each of those areas, steadily the performance improved every single quarter. Did not quite attain the level of on-site shops, but was getting close. And that's good because, honestly, you want to make sure that your on-site teams are able to as effectively close a lease virtually as they can on-site. And again, we're getting close. So the 3 key areas that we're going to take a closer look at next, where we saw, again, a big performance boost, but not quite hitting that on-site level, are the invitation to tour, the actual apartment tour itself, and then closing. Those are 3 big categories, so we'll break them down a little bit more. So the first part here is the invitation to tour. Now, the invitation to tour, we're actually going to compare these results to a typical phone shop, because the phone shop is where we are assessing if they are inviting somebody to tour. We specifically looked at phone shops pre-COVID, because we know phone shops during COVID, a lot of people were not doing on-site tours, and so there wasn't that really good measurement to see how it compared. So we're looking at 83% of the time on phone shops pre-COVID, people were being invited to come to the community and tour. Now on virtual shops, what we can see is in Q2, we had a low percent, 36% were invited to do a virtual tour. That you can see steadily increased up to 52% by Q4 in terms of inviting to tour. There's a lot of reasons for why this improvement happened over the time period. Obviously operations changed. There's a lot of change management going on during that time. So, having a virtual tour as an option, knowing what it was, how to do it, that was all happening during that time, of course. And then also just the comfort level for our leasing professionals, realizing that, oh, this is what we're doing. We're going to be inviting them to do a virtual tour. I need to extend an invitation. And the fact that it had to be as consistent as it is when you do a phone call with a prospective resident. So when we look at the information, typically where the scores dropped off, one is obviously they just didn't invite anyone for a tour. But one thing we saw a lot, and this was a big surprise for some of our property management companies that ordered virtual shops and expected all of their locations to be doing virtual tours, we actually found quite a bit on-site employees that were told that virtual tours were not an option, or they told their customers on the phone that virtual touring would not be an option. That was a surprise. They were supposed to be offering it, but whether it was miscommunication, not clear on the process, or just their comfort level was low, there were a lot of situations where the leasing professional just didn't offer the virtual tour. So that was a big finding. Okay, the next item where we saw a big improvement was the actual providing a visual tour of the apartment. Big increase here, pretty consistent with actually the invitation for tour. We started at 48%, we got up to 68%. 20% improvement over 2 quarters, pretty darn good. Again, not quite to the level that we're at on site. With on-site shops, 90% of the time a tour is provided, but we're getting there, we're getting close. Where we did not see improvement though in this area was in terms of touring property amenities. That stayed around 41% all 3 quarters. So we did not get better over the year of showing images, whether it's live or recorded, of our amenities on site. So great place for opportunity. Okay, next one is leasing conversion. So let's see here, getting lost in mine. There we are. Okay, leasing conversion, again, big pickup, 46% to 63%. That's awesome. We're still about 20 points below on-site. This is, I'm sorry, not leasing conversion, leasing conversation. So what this is were they talking and having a dialogue, a give and take with that customer on the phone? Or was it just simply, you know, that scripted tour where they're nervous, not very comfortable, they're just speaking and saying what they need to say and not getting much from the customer, not asking questions from the customer. So you can see we got better, we got more comfortable, which is great. But again, not achieving that level of engagement or interaction that we have on the on-site tour. And that's a tough thing for virtual tours, not being in person and having to do this over a virtual device does make it more difficult to create that rapport, but especially more difficult to create that rapport if you're not having a dialogue with the customer. It's one of the biggest areas that we really do need to pick up on in terms of doing virtual tours. Okay. All right. So next we're going to get into the closing area. So again, we've got a few segments here in closing. The first section we're going to talk about in closing is asking trial questions. This one's not great, you guys. Not as happy as I'd like to see these numbers here. Asking trial questions, you guys may be familiar with this. This is things like, will this work for you? Do you like this? Can you see yourself here? And is usually done when you're touring the actual apartment or amenities to start to get a temperature on them, a read on how they're feeling, things they're getting excited about. And we did not improve over 2020 in this area. But what you'll also notice is on-site is only 64% on this as well. So this is something that we struggle with already. And that, again, is why I think it didn't improve much in the virtual tour shop, because we already aren't really good at it. So if we're focusing on improving and becoming comfortable in certain areas, it's probably not the first thing that our employees pick up on. There's a lot of other reasons I can think of too, but you know what? I would like to get your guys' opinion on this. So Tara, I think we have a poll question for this one. All right, guys, so take a look. What do you think causes this to be such a challenge for virtual tours?
And you can here choose more than one option if you wish. So there may be more than one reason that this is happening. Great, answers coming in. Thanks everybody for participating. Oh, they're coming in fast. So I'll give you
I
about.
didn't give away my bias too early on. I held back a little bit, but you know.
Well, some of the answers are pretty close, but I'll give you about 10 more seconds to put in your vote here. And now we can see the results.
Okay, let's see. All right, so number one here is getting wrapped up in the tour process instead of engaging in dialogue or conversation. I 100% agree. I mean, I really agree with I agree with all of these, honestly. But you know, I think that the getting wrapped up in the tour process and not having an engaging dialogue, again, it's one of the biggest areas of improvement in this piece, but a lot of that also stems from the comfort level that the leasing team has with being on a virtual tour. So 51% chose that, and you know, you may have chosen both. I agree. I think that absolutely is the key there. Role playing and just getting on, I mean, we're all spending more time, I'm sure, on FaceTime and things like that with family, etc. So I think we're all getting more comfortable with it. But you know, with a customer, it's a bigger comfort curve still, but we're getting better at it. The low confidence that leases can be closed virtually. Yes, that absolutely is true. That stigma is out there. It's been proved, and I've talked to so many property management companies that have been shocked at how many leases they're getting from virtual tours, which is exciting because, you know, I didn't know before COVID started how effective it would be either. But it's been extremely effective. And so I think educating our teams on that, letting them see examples of being successful, providing statistics of how many virtual leases have closed from their sister communities. I think all of those would be really powerful tools to make sure that you're sharing and educating your teams, because if they already have a low comfort level, or maybe they're a veteran leasing professional that's just used to doing it, they may have a harder time changing or having that confidence in virtual touring. So providing that education is really important. Okay, great. Thanks, Tara. Okay, so that is, yeah, it's not good numbers. I agree. I see some information in the chat, you know, that's low. Wow, not good. It's not. But again, this is something that doesn't just plague us on the virtual tour side. It's also a low score on the on-site tour side. So overall, asking those trial questions, understanding the importance of them is an important piece that we're missing. Okay, another part of closing is obviously addressing concerns and overcoming objections. This is one where I think we made great strides. We went from 56 up to almost 70%. Again, just about 20 ticks below on site. So we saw great improvement as our comfort level got up. That improved as well. And so I think this is a place where just with a little bit more elbow grease, we can get it and get it up to the same level as on-site. So, and then the next one is asking for the lease. So lower numbers than the one before, but again, you are seeing an increase from quarter to quarter as people got more comfortable, felt like virtual tours and virtual leasing was a real thing and something where you could actually close the lease virtually. We got up to 53%. We're just about 15% below on-site. On-site, you guys, surprisingly low in terms of how often we ask for the lease. What I think is so funny about this, though, this information here, in Q4 2020, we have 53% average of people who actually asked for the lease. 65% of leasing professionals went over all of the costs, deposit, pet fees, all of that information, but they didn't ask for the lease. So they feel more comfortable talking about the money than they do actually asking them to lease the apartment, it seems like it'd be an easier conversation, asking them to lease, but it's a place that we have some room for growth for sure. All right. Now let's go to the overall customer experience. I warned you guys, this is a lot of data, a lot of charts. I did not, I did not lie, but I hope you're finding it useful so far. Okay, so overall customer experience. We ask our shoppers, would you lease there? And you can see the numbers started to improve. Wobbly, certainly in Q2, Q3 as we're trying to find our groove, and starting to go up in Q4. I'd imagine as we look at those companies still doing virtual tours and shops into Q1, we're going to continue to see that number increase. Just about 15% below the on-site experience. So this comes down. This number typically from our shoppers is based on the personalization and value that was demonstrated during their experience. It's also based on if their closing efforts were strong. So if you look back at the previous information that we looked at, that's where we have the most room for growth, that personalization, that demonstrating value, and the strong closing efforts. If we can close the gap in those areas, certainly we can close that, or we can get closer to that 83% on site in terms of overall customer experience. It just comes down to a natural, thoughtful presentation and the comfort and confidence level of our leasing professionals doing the virtual leasing. That is, again, comes over time, but also comes with practice. Okay. So I struggle with this one. I said it's a bittersweet surprise. This is our follow-up. And I say bittersweet because while follow-up on virtual leasing tours was higher than on-site tours, yay, it's a low bar to set. And it decreased quarter to quarter. It did not get better. Now, we actually saw this as a trend in several areas in Q2 through Q4 when you look through the data. If you factor in during COVID, we saw, staffing issues. We saw a COVID fatigue. Obviously, we saw a lot of change management, people trying to keep up. Not only did we see a decrease in follow-up across all shop types in Q3 and Q4, we also saw a decrease in internet shop scores in Q3 and Q4. It's not typical, and it has rebounded at the end of Q4 and into Q1. It's gone back up. So it does seem to have really followed a time when people were really struggling and maybe weren't prioritizing that follow-up, maybe were overwhelmed. So, there's an opportunity to be high. We saw that 52% in Q2, and then we saw the drop off. So, I think it's obviously something to work on, but we know follow-up. I think probably everybody on this webinar knows that follow-up is something that we always have a tough time with and need to get better at. So I talked about internet shops for a second, so I want to dive into that a little bit more here. We want to talk about the impact that COVID had, not just in terms of bringing virtual leasing into play, but also how our other leasing efforts changed. So I have up here two charts that are all about internet scores. These are our internet scores from Q2 through Q4. The first chart is going to show you the scores on people that responded within 24 hours. So what percent of people responded to internet leads within the first day? You can see it decreased by nearly 10 points over those 2 quarters. Again, we're seeing it rebound already back to those Q2 levels. Right now, it did towards the end of Q4, and then we're seeing that in Q1. So it's improving again. Content of the response. Were the answers answered sufficiently? Did they try to create a dialogue? Did they include features that the person would be interested in? Things like that. Again, that's something where you can see that dip again. It started to go down in Q3, Q4. Because this really follows closely with follow-up, and it's kind of a similar task for our on-site employees, I kind of bucket them together a little bit. Again, COVID fatigue, staffing levels, a lot of change management going on. Those are some things I can see, possibly some overwhelm that may have caused that, and now it's improving again. But I also really want to think about what that means for our customers, because this is something we certainly have to solve if we know that that's what falls off when our employees are overwhelmed. What that means for our customers is a lack of timely response, if they get a response at all, not getting information that they're looking for, or maybe being treated like a number rather than a customer with that lack of a personalized response. So needing to really make sure that when you do have staffing level issues or overwhelmed staff or a lot of changes going on in your organization, that finding a way to solve for what the impact will most likely be on your follow-up and your internet responses is really important to know. The next one, we saw a big pickup on AI appointment scheduling, artificial intelligence appointment scheduling. A lot of people turning to this, especially saw a big pickup on this in Q4 2020. So Tara, I think we've got one more poll today for the group.
Yes, we do.
Awesome, great. I'd love to know, has your company started using AI appointment scheduling on your website or app or any other device? Again, it's really picked up steam. I saw a lot in Q4, so I'm just curious to know.
And it looks like Amber Jones in the chat is saying that she is using Knock. Looks like Michelle is using Knock as well.
Awesome.
But
Michelle, if you don't mind adding in there, when did you start using Knock?
Several more. Charlotte and Isis also using Knock. So, but based on our poll, which it looks like the answers are slowing, there's quite some interesting answers. So I'll give you about 2 more seconds, get your votes in. Lots more Knock fans coming in the chat. So I'm going to end the poll now and let's see how we're doing with AI.
Yeah, this is interesting. Yeah, okay, very good. So you guys can see here, obviously with us sharing the information, we've got roughly, doing some quick math, 31% that either have it and love it or have it and are figuring it out. So 30%, that's a third of the industry there. That's great. Another 20% looking into it, and then half that either haven't heard of it or aren't using it at all. So there's more opportunity. And if you haven't heard of it, well, you heard of it today, but you'll probably hear about it more in the near future. Great. Okay. Well, for those of you who haven't heard about it, and you probably started to get a little inkling of what it may be, this is what allows customers to schedule appointments online and not have to call the leasing office and during leasing office hours to actually schedule the appointment. There's a lot of other benefits to it as well, which we're going to talk about right here. The first and foremost is this is really meaningful to your customers because 95, I think, % at this point of customers begin their apartment search online. So they're already on your website, they're already looking there. And if you have a chance for them to book an appointment directly there without calling the leasing office, that is a super huge convenience for them, especially if they're like me and they're doing a lot of this searching at night after leasing office hours, and they don't want to wait to either call the next day or send an email and wait for a response. They just want to be able to book an appointment. It's so convenient. The other thing that's really good about having this appointment scheduling tool is that you typically will weed out non-serious customers. They have to actually invest time to fill out the information. There's no pressure for them to make an appointment, so they are wanting to make the appointment, and they're providing personal data already. So this makes them more serious customers, which makes them more likely to show up, which also makes them more likely to lease. And if they're out there looking at 5 to 6 different apartment communities, and you're one of the maybe 2 that have an appointment scheduling tool, they're probably more likely to schedule that appointment with you than they are the ones that don't have it. So it certainly helps with that conversion part. Another great benefit is that you get a lot of information about the customer before they actually come on site. And if you use that information the way you should, it can be a huge opportunity to provide a personalized experience for that customer. And in the end, it all comes down to customer convenience. That's what we're looking for. That's what the customer is looking for. So usually on these tools, they get to choose the time, day and time that they want to come in. A lot of times on these tools, they get to choose how they want to tour. If they want to do a virtual tour or a self-guided tour or an agent-led tour. So those are all typical things that you're going to see with this type of a solution. There is a stat here from Multifamily Insiders. Multifamily pros using our tour scheduler see that 89% of prospects who schedule their appointment online are showing up for the tour, and nearly 40% go on to rent. So those are high conversion ratios. Also, the other benefit to this is when you have staffing level issues. This is why it became so popular with COVID too. You have staffing level issues, you have fewer people who can go and do walk-ins, and you need to make sure that there's not a big overlap in traffic. And you're dealing, like I said, with lower staff levels, and you need to know when you need to be on site. So it really did help that. It's why it turned into a mega trend for 2020. But I see this just continuing to grow and grow and grow, because it's going to become, if not already, a big competitive advantage for property management companies that have it. So, and I heard Knock, BetterBot's one, I've heard Perk. So there's lots of options out there. Okay.
There's also, Christy, sorry to interrupt, but while you're on the AI subject, we do have a question from Sue Essa about defining an online appointment setting feature on a website versus an AI appointment setting experience. Do you have any wisdom that you can share there, or do we need to circle back?
Yeah, we can circle back a bit. I know it's a tool, like depending on who is hosting or building your website. I know various ones have tools built in to them, and then other people use services that they connect to their websites. So there's different ways you can do it. The bottom line is just having a way where the customer has that ability to do that online. It syncs to your on-site team, so they know when to expect people. They don't double book their calendars and things like that. So
perfect. Thank you.
You bet. Okay. So why, right? Why would a customer choose to use an appointment scheduler? It's kind of obvious, but we'll just say it's all about convenience. It is convenience all day long. That's what they want. And this puts their convenience meter super, super high. But we did a lot of assessments in 2020 on the customer's experience using this tool. And there are some things that are happening out there that are certainly causing that convenience meter to go down. And unfortunately compromising the financial investment that's being made in these tools. So these are important things for us to address as quickly as possible with our on-site teams. The first thing that we saw was leasing professionals that just weren't aware of the appointment at all. And when the customer showed up, it just seemed like they didn't have any clue they were supposed to be there. They weren't ready for them. And, that could be lack of organization. It could be lack of understanding how to use the tool, different things, but something to be aware of. The next thing that we saw were employees asking the customer to change the appointment that they scheduled, which seems harmless. But when the whole idea was to schedule a time online and not have to contact the leasing office, and presumptively it was a really convenient or good time for that person, changing the time is not the best experience and should be avoided as much as possible. Now it could be that, it could be completely harmless and there was a quarantine or COVID issue or some other kind of staffing issue. It could just be that it was a different preferred time or there was a double booking. And those are things that have to be figured out and are avoidable. The next thing that we saw a lot were the leasing professionals not using the information that the customer offered up when scheduling the appointment to prepare for the appointment. And when that happens, there's different things that come out of that. There are, maybe the customer said, I chose self-guided tour as what we actually saw this. I'm using real examples here. They said their preference was a self-guided tour. They marked it very clearly on there. When they came on site, they were not offered that option, and the leasing professional walked with them and toured the apartment with them. Was not their preference, was not what they asked for. And so obviously right there, you're missing a big piece of that. Another one is asking the customer for the same information that they filled out already on the form. You don't want to be asking them when they want to move. You want to confirm with them that you know this information already and say, okay, so let me make sure you're still looking to move April 1st. Yep, that's right. As opposed to, when are you looking to move? Like they never filled out and used all that time to fill out that information for you already. So each of these individual issues on their own can deplete the customer's convenience. And again, like I said, diminish the value of that investment. And certainly, hinder the leasing process. So room for improvement there. Okay, so another big lift in 2020 was on self-guided tours. And in terms of self-guided tours, there's all sorts of different terms out there or ways for people to describe it, but what we've seen the biggest lift on is what you would consider to be a normal on-site tour where people come to the leasing office, but then they go and do the apartment tour on their own. And even some of the amenities tours on their own. We see a lot of that. We're seeing a little bit, but not a lot of truly self-guided tours where there's no contact whatsoever when they come on site, but not as much of that yet. So in terms of what we see as benefits to self-guided tours, first and foremost, the customers prefer it. Hands down, they prefer it. It's a better customer experience. Most of people say it's a better experience because they can tour at their own pace. They can better picture themselves in the apartment. If they're there with somebody else, they can speak freely with that person without caring that the leasing professional is hearing what they're saying. So, it's just a better experience. And they've gotten used to that kind of self-guided experience without the salesperson from other things they've been doing, like buying cars and things like that. It increases the conversion ratio big time, which is a surprise. But leasing conversions, NMHC OpTech stat, leasing conversions increased by 86% on self-guided tours versus being escorted. So that's a big number. And then it's more efficient for the leasing office team. They can be doing other stuff, getting other things done while that person's out there and touring the apartment. And then, you're just getting double the work. So the big problem with the self-guided tours right now is that they're not offered enough. And it's it's not something where your customers are going to automatically know to ask for it. They may, but a lot of times they don't. And the best practice really for our leasing professionals out there is to consistently offer it as an option to everybody that comes in the door, especially knowing that it's the preference. If it's an option, it's their preference usually, 75% of the time. And if you're offering it to one for fair housing purposes, you need to offer it to all. So an important piece there. And we did assess some self-guided tours in 2020 as well. So very important findings. And if you're doing self-guided tours, which I know a lot of folks are, things to make sure that you guys have figured out right now. The first one is provide information and instructions ahead of the tour, especially a map and signage or some sort of directions or walking routes. I can't tell you the number of video shops I've seen where the customer's gotten lost on their own, walked into a maintenance closet, or went down the hallway the wrong way. So be sure that is something that you are providing. And then something that has information for them when they're in the apartment, so that can help do the selling and can help answer their questions, features and amenity details, things like that. Another big opportunity we have here, and this is going to sound really familiar because we talked about with the virtual tours, is personalizing the experience. There's great opportunity to stand out and be memorable. So, number one, first of all, again, make sure you're personalizing that conversation, being prepared with their information, but then find opportunities to stand out and create a memorable experience in that apartment. I've heard some people creating a video. So when they walk into the apartment, there's a TV on the wall and they push a button and they play an introductory video, or a little welcome card that's handwritten and has the person's name on it that's sitting there in the apartment. Just little things like that can make a difference. And then the last thing, and again, this is a really critical piece that we're missing, is reconnecting and converting. I call them ghost leasing professionals, and I saw this a lot too. The shopper comes back from their tour and they get down to the leasing office and there's nobody there. They just can't find the person. And they're walking around looking, wondering what's going on. And there's a couple of things that are wrong with that, obviously. I mean, number one, there's no expectations set before the shopper went out on the tour to say, hey, when you come back down, we're going to get together, and give them a reason to want to talk to you and what you're going to go through and what questions you're going to answer, and know that they should expect to have a conversation with you after the tour. And then also if you're ghosting and you're just missing, the person's just going to walk out. Or they're going to be wandering around for somebody looking and get frustrated. So, have those expectations set, and then make sure you're really reconnecting with the person before you actually go in for the close. They went and they saw the apartment on their own. You have no idea what their experience was like. So there's a lot of questions that need to be had that normally you might have on that leasing tour that you now need to have when they come back. So, okay. All right. So really tying this up and summarizing it down to a couple of buckets here in terms of what our opportunity for the future is. We made great strides in 2020. We've got a long way to go still. We can do it. But the first focus we need to really make sure that we and our leasing teams are all aligned with is, number one, it's about the customer's preferences. It's not about the leasing professional's preferences. That leasing professional may prefer to do on-site shops or may not like self-guided tours, but it's not up to them. So it needs to be about the customer. So number one, having solutions and technology that help support those leasing options, and then getting employee buy-in and enabling them. And then throughout any of those types of leasing practice changes, making sure that as much as you can, you're amplifying that convenience factor, and that personalization factor. That's what your customer is looking for. And then the other bucket that we need to make sure everybody is aligned with is that virtual tours really can be as effective as in person. The fact that we got those numbers as close as we did in 3 quarters and still getting better just shows. And also the number of people that prefer virtual tours and are willing to lease without ever seeing the apartment, that number grew astronomically in 2020. I think it was at like 18% in March, and it was at 30-something% by May, and then it was getting even higher in the fall. So people are willing to do it. They're willing to lease without actually going to see the apartment. But we have to make sure we're consistently offering the tour options. We're focused on building the relationship with that customer, because it's going to be a lot harder to do it virtually. We are having that dialogue, that back and forth conversation with them. It's not just a robotic script of an interaction. And then having confidence that you can close. You can close this, you can ask for that lease virtually. They don't need to come in. They may prefer to come in, and that's okay. But absolutely, you have that opportunity to close that lease virtually. Okay. So that is everything I have here. I've seen some questions coming in. So Tara, I'm hoping you can cue some up for me.
Yes, definitely. So the first question that we have, this is about safety issues with self-guided tours. How does this make other residents in the building feel when there's someone roaming the property? Which I'm sure is a concern for more than Brianna.
Yeah, so it's a great question. And, you know, doing self-guided tours isn't new in the industry. It's been going on for quite some time. So there's been some trials in figuring out the best way to do this. And there's a few things that are really important. Number one, there's always that transfer of identification, so you know who they are. A lot of times though, and I know some appointment schedulers will have this too if they're going to do a self-guided, they'll require a credit card for any damages. I know that's not always a practice, but that certainly is a possible practice. In terms of residents though, we actually have someone who works for us who has seen, they do self-guided tours at their community, and they've seen a couple of lost individuals walking around their community who are looking for the apartment. And they wear a lanyard that shows them that they've been to the leasing office and that they're there for a self-guided tour. So they're very easily recognizable. And then they also provided communication out to the residents to let them know about some of the safeguards they have in place, that they are taking their ID, they have an identifying lanyard, things like that. So those are some different ideas.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah.
Another self-guided tour question that came from Charlotte and Aisha, I think, also had the same question.
Yeah,
The
Aisha?
results that you were reviewing, does it seem that would maybe be area related? Does the area you're in possibly make a difference about that self-guided tour data?
I'm not sure if you're meaning that the type of community, like if it's a high-rise versus a garden community, or if that's a variant you're talking about. A market, New York versus suburb, or also location.
Yeah.
You know, it's a good question. I didn't break down the data by region. I did know. Hi, Aisha. I did notice that we go way back. Sorry. I did notice that oftentimes the struggle with the garden level was when they weren't next, like very close to each other, the leasing office and the apartment they were going to, and actually having signage around really helped to direct that. And then a high rise, usually it was going down the wrong hall direction, not knowing which way to go. But in terms of by market, no. And it's something I'll look at because I didn't notice any kind of trend, but I also wasn't looking for that.
Great, thank you. And then just two more, I think, relatively quick self-guided tour questions. One is whether it's beneficial for the leasing agent to be on screen during a pre-recorded virtual tour. Is that something that you think is necessary, advisable, helpful?
I do. I think anytime you can put a face with whoever's talking, whether it's recorded or whether it's live, I think that is a phenomenal tool. It helps build that rapport. And if you think about it, if that person ever did lease there, and they then see that person when they come in, they already know their face. There's someone recognizable. So not only does it build a rapport during that time, but it also helps with that long-term customer cycle. Absolutely, I think it's best practice to show face. Now, you don't need to show it the whole time. Some of the best ones I've seen have been just in the beginning. They introduce themselves, they say a few things, they tell them what they're going to show, and then they turn it around and they show what they're going to show, or they start showing the recording of it. And then they come back and show their face again, where they're going to start asking more detailed questions. Asking maybe something that's maybe they're on pause and they're having a dialogue, right?
And Amber is pointing out, thanks Amber Jones, that there are some great pre-recorded videos that you can find, of course, on YouTube.
Great examples out there. Thanks, Amber.
We have one more question from Wendy. What tools are being used for self-guided tours? Like, what are some handy tools that folks might use?
Yeah, so again, there's different types of self-guided tours. There are some where most of them that the industry are doing right now does still require the person to come to the leasing office, and they'll get some sort of a key, or sometimes they'll provide a QR code or some sort of digital code to access. And then other times you don't even have to go to the leasing office. And again, there's like smart locks and things like that that can be used to provide access to the apartment. Once in the apartment, again, I've heard of quite a few people doing recordings and putting them on the computer, or I'm sorry, on the television. So they can actually hit play and watch a welcome video that kind of gives them an overview of the community and the apartment. So that's a really cool tool that can be used. I've heard of some doing video cameras too for security purposes inside the apartment. So that's an option probably as well. I think that's most of what I've heard of. There's lots of other little things here and there, but those are the biggest things.
All right. Thank you again, Christi, so much for the big picture data stuff and then the tactical, smaller advice. And we are really grateful to everybody for your great questions, your attentiveness, and for being here. As a reminder, this is being recorded and we will be sharing the recording, including the visuals, with everyone who registered today. So again, let me say thank you, Christi, so much. And I'm already looking forward to this same benchmark deep dive a year from now to see how we've progressed. So thanks everyone for being here. Thank you, Christi. And I hope everyone stays safe and well.
Thanks, Tara. Thanks everyone so much. I appreciate it.
Thanks.